Welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the creator of this office altering podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. As always, you can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. I am, as you all know, very, very, very passionate about our conversation today. The value of having difficult conversations in the workplace and with, especially when you have that with a family or a friend. And we have Kelly Beattie here, president and lead trainer at FirstStar Consulting Group. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there.
Nice to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and FirstStar.
Well, I have been doing this type of work for over 25 years, really helping to untap potential in other people and help them achieve and accomplish their goals. I launched FirstStar Consulting Group nearly 9 years ago to really help organizations not only within Southeast Michigan but across nationally to do the same, to work with companies at an organizational level, at a department level, and at an individual level, to be able to support them.
And where can our listeners find you? I'd like to just give that right off bat. A lot of times people like to Google and follow along as we talk.
Absolutely. I am very fortunate. Most of my business is word of mouth. I am working on a web page, but it's not launched yet. So if people can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. I think LinkedIn is a new website anymore. Anyhow, people I've seen conversations like the websites are dead. People are just so social driven, huh?
Yeah, they really are.
So let's dive in. Talk to us about that. So often you would be amazed. A lot of our listeners are attorneys and work in the law firm. And I am so amazed when I get phone calls from entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, C-suite. But they'll say to me, I know I need to have a conversation with them, but I don't like conflict. I'll hear that so often, even from attorneys. I'm like, what? You're an attorney. What do you mean you don't like conflict? This is insanity. I mean, I've seen them. They're rock stars in mediations in the courtroom and with business owners because they're speaking to their peers. But when it comes time, and a lot of times our clients are small, solo business owners. So they do hire family, they do hire friends, they do hire people that are a friend of a friend because they come from referrals. 90% of their business is referral based. And sometimes they have to have a conversation with a reset conversation. Talk to us a little bit, because this honestly is one of the biggest struggles for business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs about how to have those crucial conversations, courageous conversations, difficult conversations, come to Jesus meetings, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure you've heard them all.
Absolutely. So it's really critical to make sure that the relationship is at the forefront of the conversation, and that you're having the conversation because you want to strengthen the relationship with the other person. And when I go into these difficult conversations, or I go in and I start to facilitate difficult conversations, I always ask them, what is their goal for the relationship? And that puts it in a different mindset, because then it takes the personal side out of it, and then you can deal with the situation. Right. So often conflict comes and it becomes about the person, but it's really when people are upset or frustrated over a situation. So to be able to be mindful of that is where I always encourage people to start, is to think about, how do you want the relationship to be with the other person at the end of the conversation?
Wow. That is, That is something, I'll tell you, because a lot of times, especially when we're busy and the phone's ringing off the hook and work is piling up and we have looming deadlines and we're back to back to back to back and don't even have time to grab a glass of water. It's, the emotions are typically what's at the forefront, I find. And I love, if you could just take the power of the pause in a moment of how that's a really powerful question. How do you want this relationship? How do you want to leave it? How do you want it to look like? And putting that in the forefront, because a lot of times people don't, they put the situation at hand sometimes, but in my experience, and I'd love your insight on this, it's typically because there's so many stacked up and compounding conversations that they didn't have, where the emotions tend to get in the driver's seat, and it tends to be about the person and tends to be a blow up because they didn't, number one, stuff things down or put it under the rug. And then, or number two, they're really not putting the human in the relationship in the forefront, like you said.
Absolutely. So often we will let something minor. We won't, I'm not going to say anything because it's just something little. Well, all of those little things, like you said, add up. And then all of a sudden it becomes an explosive conversation where now I'm so frustrated because I didn't just say, Molly, why did you help me understand? Why did you say that in that meeting? And have you come back and say, oh my gosh, no, that wasn't what I meant at all. And have us have that conversation, because so often people have really good intentions. Most people don't set out to hurt people's feelings or to offend. Most people really want to be a good person and to be able to be a good coworker, good employee. What happens is that our intentions don't match the impact. So if I come out and I say something to you, and in my head, it just sounded so much better, and I tripped over the words as it came out of my mouth, the impact, I have to be aware of how my words land. And in that moment, if it rubs somebody the wrong way, having a culture that it's perfectly okay to say, Kelly, why did you say it like that? And have me be able to say, oh my gosh, it sounded so much. Oh no, that's not my intention at all. I am so sorry. What I really meant to say was this. If there is conflict, to be able to be direct about it and to be able to just be able to sit down and say, that really bothered me. And I'd like to talk to you about why it bothered me. There has to be that's why I start these conversations about the relationship, because there has to be trust. And there has to be respect within the discussion. Because if I'm going to say something, I need to know that you have my best interest at heart, and I have your best interest at heart. And in doing so, it creates a safe space for us to be able to have those conversations.
You said so much there. Let's go with the example, because I received a phone call this morning that an employee was really, really triggered because yesterday, so she's going on vacation tomorrow. And I'm going to be out of the office, one of the key employees, a leader within the firm. And she's going to be out for 6 days. And that's a long time in a small business, especially for a key employee to be out. And they're on a path to grow, and they're growing. And they just onboarded and hired a few new people, what have you. And at the water cooler, which is where these irresponsible statements typically come out, the attorney had said something of the nature to her that said, well, I'm so glad that we are going to be finally bringing on new employees so all the mistakes can stop being made. And then just left and went on their way. And the employee sat with this all day yesterday. She's like, I couldn't sleep at all. I'm so upset. I'm I'm so frustrated with it. And then I said, okay, well, you need to have a conversation right here before you even go on vacation. Don't take this on vacation with you, and just have a clear conversation to just say, hey, I just want to real quick, when you go into your daily huddle today with him, because you guys have your daily huddle as his key person, and just say, I just want to check in with you. That statement didn't land very well. What have you? Well, as I'm helping her form the exact precise words, what to say, and I get this both on the employee and the entrepreneur side, she's like, well, it wasn't that big a deal. It's just what he does. And then boom, I could not talk her into having the conversation. What's your experience? So I guess my question is, what's your experience when this happens over and over again of the stuffing?
I would do the same and try to encourage that person to have that conversation. Oftentimes the anticipation of the conversation is way worse than having the conversation itself. Conflict is actually a very healthy thing. And I get really nervous when I go into organizations and they say, oh, we never fight. Everything is great. Mm-hmm. It's not realistic, right? So to be able to build the culture and to be able to build the having it be okay to have that conversation. People would rather stuff and to take it on themselves versus being able to go, especially to a boss, and say, that didn't really sit well with me. They would much prefer to just say, oh, it wasn't a big deal. And so what I typically would do is I would go back and say, I think it is a big deal. Mm-hmm. I think it is a big deal. And I think that for your own self-worth and self-purpose, I think you need to have that conversation. Because when we continue to stuff, it starts to erode our ability to be resilient. And it puts us in a state where we start to have self-doubt, and to say, we start to mistrust our own feelings on something, and to be able to let that behavior go. I was working with an organization, and they had a very difficult person in the organization. And they said, oh, that's just the way she is. You just have to learn to deal with her. And I said, I don't think that that's fair, because why would you want your employees to have to work around this particular person? Somebody needs to just have a conversation with her and talk to her. And so I sat down and I said, do you understand how you are being perceived within this organization? And she said, no. And I told her, and she broke down and started to cry. And she said, nobody told me. Because nobody told me, I thought it was okay.
And a lot of times it's because the main guy or gal or the main boss or the person before them that trained them, that's no longer in the quote unquote building, trained them that way. And it was acceptable because there is this thundering silence that's just swirls through the organization. So it's one of your own self-worth and standing up for yourself and all that stuff. But as you were talking, one thing that stood out for me, you're doing a massive disservice to the business owner, to the leader, to your colleagues, what have you, because, okay, you can't handle it anymore. You don't say anything and then you leave. And then somebody else comes in, and the revolving door, the vicious cycle continues, and it's impacting the entrepreneur in regards to their ultimate results. So a lot of people, in my experience, we spend more waking hours at work than we do anywhere else within our 7 days a week, 24 hours. And a lot of people, especially since the pandemic, the days of going to work for a paycheck are no longer. They want impact. They want to be part of something that is service driven. They want to be part of something that is heart centered and driven and things of that nature. So in most organizations and people that you work with and I work with build a culture of that. And that's the type of clients they want in the personal service industry. But I always say, like, remove your yourself from it and look at the impact of everybody else. If you can even, sometimes it helps to be like, okay, well, if you're not going to do it for you, because a lot of times we're all sacrificial lambs. Well, I can handle it. Oh, it's not that bad, what have you. Think about being an advocate for the clients, because if it's happening in the office like that, chances are that energy and essence is being brought into the client experience in the community and your friends and family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It has such a rippling effect, and it reaches places that you never would think that it would get to. When you're not able to articulate your anger or your frustration, it will simmer and it will come out in a different form. And I hear this a lot within, when I'm doing executive coaching. Well, a client will say, you know what, Kelly, I didn't have the conversation with the employee, but I went home and yelled at my kid. And I realized that I was frustrated with the situation at work, and I took it out on my family, because the human body has to have that release. Yes. For whatever the emotion is. It doesn't matter if you are excited about something, if you don't allow your body to express that emotion, it's going to come out in a different way, because we just can't hold on, especially with negative feelings, with anger and frustration, and to be able to identify a safe way. One of the tips that I will offer to people when they need to have a difficult conversation, start with empathy. Are you okay? Is everything okay with you? Because you sounded really angry and upset in that meeting, and I'm just concerned about you. And it takes the conflict, it takes the defensiveness, and whisks it away. Because if somebody's reaching to me with empathy, it's really challenging for me to come back with anger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm even thinking about this, because talk to us about when you have family members or friends that are working in the firm, because I see that a lot of times that they won't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
No, they tend to be, those types of personal relationships tend to be like the sacred cow. I can't talk to that person because that's the owner's daughter. Yes. Or I can't say anything because it's the owner's wife or the owner's husband, the owner's spouse. It becomes even more critical to have those conversations so you don't have resentment. You mentioned crucial conversations, and a lot of the work that I do, a lot of the facilitating of these types of conversations is based off of the book called Crucial Conversations. It's by Joseph Gurney. Are you familiar?
Yes,
with the book?
Love it.
Yes. And so when you're talking about personal relationships, you have a longer history, and so you have these what the book refers to as the stories that you tell yourself, right? And so you draw a conclusion based off of what you've seen and heard, and you make assumptions. If it is a family member or close friend of somebody within the organization, you make an assumption that, oh, I can't say anything to that person, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. Where oftentimes that person has a higher standard for themselves because of their relationship within the organization, and they want that feedback. If it's the daughter of the owner or the spouse of the owner, they want to know that they're doing a good job because they want to be able to be successful on their own merit.
So when it comes to having that conversation with the boss's daughter, spouse, what have you, what would you say to, let's start at the top. What would you say to the entrepreneur, the business owner, or whoever, C-suite, that has employed and brought in a family member to say to their employees, maybe in a retreat setting, a meeting setting with the family member and the employees, to create ground rules and rules of engagement?
I honestly would not change the message if the entrepreneur has expectations of his or her employees. It should be expectation regardless of who they are. And to be able to stand up in a retreat or a full organization meeting type setting and say, this is what I expect out of you. And being able to have that conversation. And what it does is it absorbs the family member or the friend into the organization because they're not being singled out. They have expectations across the board, regardless of who that person is.
Yeah, I love that. I think even just when you do add people to your team, and if it is a family member or what have you, or you bring in a new employee, because to your point, they make up stories in their head that, oh, okay, who's everyone here? Oh, that's the boss's wife. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, there's special provisions, there's special rules for this. Yeah. So, I'm going to behave differently when she's sitting next to me, or I'm not going to, something I would say to Susie, I'm not going to say to the boss's wife. I hear that all the time. So maybe in your onboarding process, your hiring process, when you are bringing new people, when you do have family members and friends and what have you, in your next team meeting or what have you, or you're introducing the new employee, making certain that you're consistently reiterating your values and your standards for everybody in the building, including you as a leader. I always tell my team, one of our core values that we have is accountability. And I tell my team all the time, I need accountability and consequences more than anybody in this company.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And to be able to introduce the new employee as an individual, not as the relation to said person, right? So if it is the boss's daughter, the boss's spouse, the boss's son, close friend of the family, just being able to have that introduction and not necessarily say, oh, this is who this person is. That will come out organically, but to just be able to introduce we have a new employee, and then say the name without necessarily having that disclosure.
Oh, so you think don't disclose who the person is first and foremost when you introduce them as a human? As a human,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The relationship will come out soon enough. And oftentimes in that situation, typical onboarding, I allow the individual to introduce themselves. And then it gets to be within their terms as to how they want to introduce themselves. There's feelings of, am I supposed to be here? Am I here because I'm qualified, or am I here because of who I happen to know? And so by allowing that person to introduce themselves, it puts it on their terms to introduce themselves and to be able to disclose that relationship. If they have the same last name, somebody might question and say, oh, are you? And then you can address it then. But really being able to onboard that person as you would anybody else.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll say, if you are going to bring on someone with the same last name or what have you, and they come in and they introduce themselves in the team meeting or what have you, if it's your spouse, your child, what have you, that you as the hirer have, really clear conversation with them and empower them when they say introduce. Hi, I'm Susie. I'm Bob's daughter. And I just want you to know this is why I'm here. I have a master's in marketing. This is where I'm coming from. And I really want you to know, empower them to cut the crap and to make sure there's no story stopping immediately, and be like, I just want you to know I'm excited to be a member of this team. And I follow everyone else's standards. And by no means should my last listening be any different. We are a culture of, and then again, it gives you the opportunity to anchor to your standards. We are a culture that operates on facts without emotion. We are a culture that of coaching. We are a coach, whatever it might be, and really iterating into the values that you have, your core values, and how they are very, number one, they're clear. These are our core values. I know how we operate. And, that we have crucial conversations. A lot of firms, I love crucial conversations. I make that be some version of that be within their core values, some version of that we have clear upfront conversations in real time. And so I really like that, of not the boss, so to speak, saying it, but maybe empower the family member to really show up as a qualified, united, collaborative member of the team.
Absolutely. And also what I find is within these smaller organizations, it is a family business. So having a family member or a close friend is not unusual, right? It's not we haven't, this is the first time we're bringing on a family member or a friend. It's oftentimes a family-based business. And to have a family member join or a close friend join, that could be part of the culture. And to just be able to onboard that person as anybody else would be a norm.
So talk to us a little bit about the value of having difficult, crucial, courageous conversations in the workplace. And, entrepreneurs are always like, well, what's a payoff? What's a benefit? What's a ROI? I don't have time for all this mushy feeling stuff. I don't have time to have a conversation like that. Just talk to us about the value.
The value becomes in efficiency. And when you're talking about ROI on difficult conversations, there is so much unproductive time that happens when there is a conversation that has to be had that's not had. Because what happens, like I mentioned before, I have to get it out somehow. And if I don't talk directly to the person, I'm talking to other people. And it begins to erode productivity, because now I'm spending time, like you mentioned, at the water cooler, right? Talking and saying, can you believe that? Can you believe what Susie just did? I can't even, oh my gosh. And then we start focusing our time and our attention over here versus the work that needs to get done. Whereas if I, as a business owner, are able to foster a conversation and foster a culture that values having difficult conversations in real time, it allows me to be able to have a more productive team, because we can address the conflict. We can have a conversation. You can say, Kelly, why did you say it like that? I can apologize, or I can say, oh my gosh, you know what? This is exactly why. This is what I found. And we can foster a dialogue, and then it's done.
Yeah.
The goal, it's fascinating, because within every interaction, you're either strengthening the relationship or you're weakening the relationship. There is no neutral. And so by leading and saying, I value this relationship and this bothered me, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, it becomes situational. It doesn't become personal. And so then it allows us to minimize defensiveness and open up collaboration. And it doesn't have to take a long time. It can be a 30-second conversation to say, wow, I can't believe you said that. And like, I know, I'm so sorry. That wasn't what I had intended. Or yes, I let my emotions get the better of me this time. I'm really sorry. And then have it be okay to be done.
Yeah. And I love it. In every conversation, you're either, say that again.
You're either strengthening the relationship or you're weakening the relationship. There is no neutral.
Write that down, listeners, and put that on a sticky note everywhere. everywhere that you turn, where you're like, what the heck's wrong with you? Like where you just want to blow up. And I love sticky notes and having little power phrases like that I can anchor to, because it stops me in my tracks of, okay, how's this going to land? How am I going to show up? Is this going to be helpful or hurtful?
Correct. Exactly. And there's lots of those as to when people are talking. And I think that particular quote, I believe that came from the book Crucial Conversations. And so you pick up these phrases and these reminders about, there is the think method. Is it thoughtful? Is it honest? Are you being kind? Is it necessary? Right. And so really being able to help give you tools to have these conversations. Why is it that I'm saying something to you? Did it really bother me? Or am I acting from a different emotion? Right? Because
go ahead.
I was just going to say, because we have to be really reflective and think about why did that bother me? Right? For your example earlier about the boss saying about, happy to be onboarding additional people because then the mistakes are going to stop. Hopefully mistakes are not going to stop. That's how we learn and grow, right? That's how we grow and develop. But it probably struck your client in a way because of what was happening around her in her environment. She's getting ready to go on vacation for 6 days, right? She may have anxiety over what's going to happen in her absence, and to be able to be reflective and to think, why did that strike me in that way? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I worried because a family member is ill? Am I really concerned because I've got a huge project looming and I'm worried about its success or failure? And so when we can be self-reflective as to really being able to figure out why it bothered us, it helps us to give the language and the words to be able to express it to somebody else.
Wow.
To be able to say, you know what, Molly, I am sorry. That really struck me. That struck me raw because I am tired. My son decided not to sleep last night, right? And I'm feeling very raw and sensitive. So that's why I reacted the way I did. So I apologize, right? But until we can realize why it affected us the way it did, it's going to be really hard to bring words and language to it.
Powerful. In closing, what would you say to our listeners who maybe don't have a culture of crucial conversations, don't have a culture that emulates everything that we said to have real time? What can they do after listening this to walk into their team, walk into their business, and be able to build a culture of this and be able to communicate people that we do have a place of safety and trust, and we not only do we have a value for this, but we actually depend on it.
Yeah, it's something that especially with folks working remotely, folks returning back to the office, there is a lot of anxiety. And if you are in an organization that it's not part of your culture, start the conversation with some key influencers as to how do you shift that culture. It could be your direct boss or the president of the organization. It could be a colleague. And if you start to mimic the behavior, if you start to change how you interact with others, they will automatically change how they interact with you.
That's very powerful, yet very simple and easily to just start doing. So whoever's listening to this, if you're an employee and you have colleagues or you're the entrepreneur, or you're the team leader, or you're the COO, CEO, whatever it might be, or the family member that's listening to this, or the friend of the family that's working in the business. I love that. Just start with you. Start with you. And the next interaction, maybe list out one or two people or interactions or situations that triggered you and that you know you need to have a conversation, but you haven't had a conversation about, and just start there. Start at the small stuff.
Absolutely.
Start small.
Yes, we can only control ourselves. As much as we'd love to be able to control other people, it really can frustrate those that I work with, because somebody will come in and say, "Oh, guess John made me so mad," and I'll just smile and say, "John can't make you mad. You have to let John make you mad. You have to give him that ability to do that." And if we can start with ourselves and to really be able to be mindful as to why we're feeling what we're feeling, that can start to change how people treat us.
Well said. All right, Kelly, thank you for being our guest today. Such a necessary and timely conversation, especially for some people that are going hybrid, going back into the office, what have you. I'm really intrigued to see how that all plays out and the studies of all that in a year or two. But I can't thank you enough for this conversation and the tips that you have provided for our listeners today of just really being able to have the crucial conversations and the value of that and handling it in real time and starting with the relationship first and foremost.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
If you like what you hear on our podcast, please feel free to visit our website at hiringandempoweringsolutions.com. So we love that you are listening to this podcast. Please drop us a line with any feedback, suggested topics you'd like to hear. And absolutely, we'd love to hear about your victories and your win in regards to creating entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world.